Joe, welcome to the show. How are you, man?
Doing well, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely stoked to have you here.
Likewise.
Yeah, really appreciate you making time for us. So you used to own an agency. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how you got into that, and you did it for 12 years? Is that correct?
I did, and my agency origin story is a bit different. I was working corporate in the Seattle area, and I just couldn't stand giving so much time to a company. I'd actually had a SaaS startup before SaaS was even an acronym a few years earlier, and I just wanted to freelance. I wanted to be able to have a little bit more fluidity with my time and what I was working on. And I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but I actually injured my hands, ended up with a full body, like disabling whatever. So it was just this horrible health issue. And I hired someone out of desperation. It was either that or I was going to go back to restaurant service. And I still remember, so it was just me. And I had a developer friend. I said, "Hey, Steven, I want you to consider joining me." Of course, I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never had an employee, scared, completely. But I remember going to IKEA and I was looking for a desk. And I remember just the feeling of the mission is going on, but I'm not there. And so that was really the reason why I ever hired employees and really got the ball rolling for me.
Being able to go to IKEA and desk shopping. I love it.
Yeah, that's the sign of like entrepreneurial achievement or business achievement is if you can buy a desk at IKEA.
Hey, I'm well stocked up on IKEA furniture.
I was going to say that's a good bar. Yeah. No, it's interesting. So what was your discipline going into the agency business in the first place?
I'm an engineer by trade, and so it's funny. I started doing software development when I was about 15. And then I got an accidental design job in Seattle. That job that I was there for 2 years. The position was web designer. And I thought that meant I was going to code. So I've always been an engineer background. I love infusing, maybe a bit of custom software to kind of bridge the gap with business so that I can automate the heck out of everything and really, really build systems. I love system design.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, that's good to know because I think that what you described there in this idea of hiring your first employee, through by accidental means, I think for so many people that represents this transition that people have to try and make when they're kicking off a business or going from solopreneur to hiring people. And that first step can be terrifying. I know even for me in starting my own business, it took being laid off and literally pushed out the door. Right. And then me going, wait a minute, I have enough freelance clients that I don't need to go back to work and being able to go. But I would have never taken the step without that push.
Right. Yeah. And I know for me, I actually did a brief stint at a corporate job. So I did my agency for 12 years, corporate stint for a year. And then I just got back because back to starting my own thing. And part of it was, as I was considering it again, do I want to work for this company? I remember just thinking every day I'm investing my talents, my energy, my time, my emotions, and I'm going to leave with nothing. Eventually, whether it's 5 years or 20 years, I'm going to leave with nothing. And I think with business, you're investing in something that's yours. And even if I'm making half the pay for the first 3-4 years, I'm okay with that because I'm not just getting the revenue, but I'm also getting the asset, and the asset is huge.
Exactly. I've always been a proponent of, that speaker costs $500. Why are you buying it? I'm like, well, that's an asset. That's something I'm putting towards the business, makes me money. I just that mentality of like, putting it towards something instead of just giving it away. Buy a house instead of paying rent, so on and so forth. You're building an asset. Right. Can you tell us about your first dive into the software world? As far as you said, you had a SaaS business before it was an acronym. What was that?
My first job was at Burger King, and I have this funny memory. This is a quick little 30-second rabbit trail. I had a boss come in, and I was told to make a cheeseburger, and the boss completely was annoyed and infuriated because I made the cheeseburger wrong, and I was so embarrassed. And then I found out I got older, and I realized actually there's different ways to make a cheeseburger, you jerk. um, like that wasn't just me, but anyways, my story was really interesting. I am a total homegrown. I was raised by my grandparents. I was in the foster care system for a while, and I got a job, and I was so excited. Like I actually have some cash. We were dirt poor. We were food bank poor. And my boss, I would call to get the schedule. When am I working? And she would get so annoyed at me. And I was just like, what the heck? Like back then you didn't even have phones to take photos with, right? Like you just, I had to write all this down manually. And so I had this devious plan where I was going to install some software that I was learning how to code. I had this devious plan that I'm going to install some software on her computer that would upload the spreadsheet to a database so that I could get my schedule and stop being the annoying caller, right? And long story short, I ended up working with the owner of that Burger King to start a company called Mr. Schedule. And it was online staff scheduling for fast food restaurants. Again, SaaS wasn't an acronym. I was training restaurant managers how to use our software that were on dial-up, like all of them. No one had high speed. And it was just I always tell people that was my education. I didn't go to college, but having a 1-800 line connected to your phone as a 17-year-old, having bug requests that wake you up at 2:00 in the morning and give you anxiety, coding a rat's nest of just horrible code.
What did you build it on? What platform?
I was learning PHP, and I'll just say this: every time I needed a query, I just wrote it in that file. Period.
Oh, okay.
So it was. But it was so much fun. I learned so many of the core disciplines in that early on SaaS.
Yeah, it's funny how the first gig kind of really hones your skills, and you might not be doing it right, but you're putting in the reps, and that's kind of what it takes to move to that next step.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, how do you think the graphic design side of things helped your current situation? So you had to go in and be a designer, but you thought you were going to be a developer. Did that help you kind of on the front end side of things as far as like figuring out UI, UX?
Yeah, and I had, just like everything else I had at that time, it was all amateur. But I had some design starts. I knew a bit of what I was doing, but it was all self-taught. And that really took it to the next level. I also found in that job that there are so many people just skating by in the corporate world. I was 21 years. I was 20 when I got the job. No, I just turned 21. My next closest a colleague was, I think, 28, 29. One of them, I was stupid and young, and I told one how much I was making because he asked me, and he got pissed. He got pissed off. I once had my team said, "Hey Joe, we're going out to this place to get some food. Did you bring your permission slip?" Which was very enjoyable those times. But I did learn so much from other designers being in that environment, and understanding the corporate world was super helpful in my career.
So let's talk a little bit more about the pivot sort of at the end of that road then. So as you finally decide, hey, it's not worth my time to be investing so much in your business. I need to be investing in mine. You decide to peel off and go start your own little operation, either as a freelancer or maybe with the intent of growing a business. But let's talk a little bit more about the decision making behind, giving up free or giving up regular income, giving up the relative security of a job with insurance and things like that, and then going into loan.
Well, I was at the advantage of being young. I was not married. I did not have kids. My overhead was $1,000 a month. And so 10 grand in the bank, like I'm set for quite a while. I was renting a room. I think it's so funny. I've talked with people. I have a friend in my town. He did a startup, and after the startup failed, one of the things that he said is, "I'll never do this again." Like he's just not wired for it. And so the way I see it is you have to pick your problems. Like some people, their biggest problem is that I'm not going to have enough cash this month. That stresses them out. I don't have a consistent paycheck. For me, I get uber stressed about not building momentum and something I get to keep. Like I get more stressed about my life is just continuing without this, me kind of putting my own destiny out there. I would rather have the risk of losing $10, $15, $20,000 a month, as long as I have a plan, than being strapped to another vision. Now, I'm not ragging on it, right? I've had employees. Good employees are so important, but there's just a wiring with an entrepreneur. Like it just kills. Like it really sucked all the life out of me. And when I have the open whiteboard, the freedom, that's when I tend to do the best.
Yeah. I can relate. I've been self-employed for quite a long time, and it's funny because, your 9 to 5 is easy compared to being self-employed because you're always on the clock when you're doing your own thing, and you're always kind of in the back of your head. What do I got to do today? What do I have to do to be prepared for the thing I have coming up in 2 weeks? And it's a lot more stress and a lot more work, but you love every second of it because it's yours.
Right.
So
yeah.
So continuing
go ahead,
on,
Ren.
I wanted to get in now, sort of scaling this organization, right? Because I think that there's a definite shift of mindset from solo freelancer, working for yourself, raising all the money for yourself. How much can you collect, and moving to a position where you're going, okay, well now I'm going to give up some portion of my salary so that I can bring somebody else on to support me.
Right.
You mentioned there was an accident involved that sort of forced your hand, literally, but then. From there, you began to grow this team all the way up to at least 12 people. I imagine there's some things you learned along the way. Talk about that.
Yeah. Well, one of the first things you have to learn is you have to, someone gave me a tip. He said, pay people to do what you suck and focus on honing in your skills. Classic marketing advice. It was genius to me, classic business advice. It was genius to me. I was like, that's killer. Who thought of this? And so little things like getting a bookkeeper. I've never done my own taxes. That's insane. I have way too much going on. So I've always had an accountant. And one of the scariest things is when you bring on your first employee because you think it's so hard. But at the end of the day, you've got to pay if you're doing a contractor, super easy, right? A 1099. But if you're doing a W-2, you've got to pay workers' comp, you've got to pay unemployment insurance, whatever your state calls it, and then you've got to do tax withholdings. But here's the big secret, and if you've not done a business or not scaled because of that fear, software freaking does all of this. And back when I was doing it, like there was a little bit more manual. Like I had someone actually call me every 2 weeks to run payroll. Like, please tell me you're not doing that, anyone. Like, I found Gusto, and they were kind of a startup when I started using them. They're huge now, and their product is just impeccable. But it literally takes care of all that, and so. All of a sudden, bringing on people and being compliant and legal and all that kind of stuff was no longer a challenge. Then I think it's understanding the disciplines, the different buckets in business. One of the things I mention occasionally is, embarrassingly, about 5 years in, I wouldn't have been able to define the difference between marketing and sales. Those are so stinking different. I would never put a marketing person on the phone. And salespeople they're good at talking with people, at closing the deal. They're not good with like, we're going to create this lead magnet and it's going to generate all these leads. No, they don't do that, right? And so I think it was little by little, eating concrete. One of my favorite sayings is eating concrete, falling flat on the sidewalk, getting back up, and all the intuition that builds. And you keep going. You keep building systems, understanding those disciplines, and I found that it got so much easier over time. I used to tell my team, if 5 years ago I would have known that we'd have the overhead that we have now, I would wear adult diapers. At one point, $5,000 of overhead was scary. Then it's 20, then it's 40, then it's 50. Then you're like, holy cow, 6 digits of overhead. Wowza. But I'm not doing everything by myself anymore. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I wonder too, if you just talk about, and maybe you didn't have this, it sounds like maybe actually we're getting to a point where this isn't, a cliche that means anything. But there used to be this idea that, from growing your business from 1 to 5 people, okay, it's relatively doable, but like that next block, that like 5 to 50 or whatever it is, 5 to 20, they say is like dramatically different. And I assume it has to do with sort of structural changes and things like that. There's probably payroll differences, things like that. But I'm not sure. And so I'm just wondering if in your experience, if there was any uniquely big change when you went from a team of 5 to a team of 6.
I would say the biggest change is I needed to have some level of leadership, even if it's just 1 or 2 folks. But it was still like, even at 11, 12 people, you can still have those as all direct reports. And so that's not, that's a lot. Okay. And so I did have leadership underneath that. I would say my bigger challenge, Ryan, was how do I scale past 12, past 10? Like that was very, very hard, because it's at 10, 11, 12 people. You can kind of, be in touch with everyone. Everyone feels like they're getting time with the CEO. You've got a clear, grasp on culture and vision. I think for me as a former agency owner, the challenge was, man, if I hire 2 more designers, maybe another designer, another developer, I have to hire another salesperson. And all of a sudden my upside may stay the same, but my downside is doubled. Like, I think agencies are incredibly hard to scale. And that's why you tend to there's not a lot of agencies, statistically or like percentage wise, that even get over 20 people. It's a talent business. And so it's really, really hard to scale. I kind of commandeered your question there and answered a different one, but hopefully that's helpful.
No, I think that's great. Well, and I think those are the kind of insights we're looking for, right? So in your case, it was clear that sort of a change in management was necessary at around 10 heads.
Yeah.
So, and because I suspect that a lot of this, the sort of what brought about this idea, that from 5 and beyond is a different level of business ownership, I'm sure it has to do with some sort of relic systems. And, maybe by then you have to have an HR, department and things like that. So it's probably more structural back then. But as you mentioned, like with Gusto and other platforms like that can sort of manage your payroll, make sure you're compliant, sort of do the job of a light HR.
Right.
It's, it maybe has changed the industry to the point that really the bigger changes come when you get to, the extent of something physical, like, more than 10 people, I just can't talk to them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's I agree with that assessment. Yeah.
Okay. So you ran your agency for 12 years and currently you're running a company called Smart Pricing Table. Can you tell us what that is and why you went in that direction?
Yeah, Smart Pricing Table is interactive proposals, like sales proposal software, and mostly for agencies, marketing agencies, digital agencies, but it really can fit any professional service company. And it's so much of my life, I feel like, is just kind of shooting from the hip, but I feel like that's how business goes. You don't know, you have no clue where it's going to lead you. But we actually had created a sales proposal software at my agency. And we had such massive success with it. I actually closed a new website for Bluetooth.com using it.
Wow.
I was able to have a salesperson do 95% of sales for about 4 years. Talking about the milestones running an agency, right? I think, getting your first project manager and getting your first salesperson, those are huge. But the software enabled him to sell. And one of the big reasons is it had a really strong catalog feature. A lot of service-based businesses, they don't do it. What the concept is productizing. Like, take your service and start to think of it more like a product that you can still customize, but isn't like, you're not just sitting down and scoping something out every single time. You've got like some base line items, some base offerings. And so I had so many customers that are like, what the heck is this? I've never seen anything like this, and can we use it? And so that kind of lit the initial fire. But, as you guys know, and your listeners know, starting a second business while you have a first one is extremely hard. So we tried, but, a big client would land and we just never were able to take it to the market. It wasn't until about 2 years ago, after a 1 year corporate stint of me trying it again, that I decided I'm going to do this. I'm just not going to have peace in my soul if I don't try to take this thing to the market and see if it would be a great benefit to other agencies and other professional service companies. So that's the origin story. Lots of more details, of course, but.
Okay, yeah, and I want to dig into those more details, but you said something that made my brain light on fire just 2 seconds ago. And so I have to return back to your agency story real fast and talk to you about salespeople.
Sure.
So I run a design agency, and I have tried, 4 or 5 times to bring on a salesperson to try and help us with growth. We've always been the most successful in just sort of, one-to-one relationships that we develop over time, but it's the slowest burn ever, and it makes it really hard to scale, right? So we did kind of what you were talking about, which was productize our service and sort of build out a subscription plan, but for other agencies, right? So for an agency that might need to rapidly scale for a project or maybe needs to offload something, we're basically a self-contained white label agency that you can hire by the month.
Right.
And so, so we put together this whole productized deal, and we brought in a new sales guy, and we're still just struggling. And the story of agencies hiring salespeople, I don't know everybody, but I know a lot of agency owners who have never been able to make this work. And so I don't know if you have any advice on that front for this ultra long-winded question, but I wonder if you couldn't talk a little bit about just finding a salesperson for a agency style business, and sort of generally speaking, what would be the qualities you'd look for, things like that.
Yeah, a few things come to mind. First, let's get real clear on what we mean by a salesperson. There's hunters and there's gatherers. Hunters are, prospectors, BDRs, people pounding the street. I never got that to work successfully with an agency. I'm not saying it doesn't. I tried, training cold callers. The only cold caller that ever worked was yours truly. I did close about $250,000 on the phone through the year, in about a year, actually. But what I'm talking about is the gatherer. So this was an account executive that I was able to hire to take inbound leads that are coming in, do meetings, and close deals. So let me just write down a couple of thoughts, because I have a few things lingering here. So the first step I would say is hiring. If you haven't heard of it, I'd grab, there's a book called Who. It's on Amazon bestseller. I believe it's A Method Hiring is the subtitle. And that book will show you how to get A players. And I can tell you, it totally works. And I had A players all the time. One of my favorite questions, Ryan, is who are your last 5 bosses and what will they rate you on a scale of 1 to 10 for overall performance when I talk to them? I love that question. I can't unpack it, but there's so much that when I talk to them. Okay. And by the way, don't you come up with a reference list. You as the hirer, the person hiring, you come up with a reference list by going over their story. I don't care. I almost don't care about what anyone thinks about you, except for supervisors, because that's what's going to tell me if you're an A player. I once had a guy who said, "Yeah, I'm a so and so would rate me a 9." He told me that like he'd go with me, or like if he started a new company, he'd take me with him. Oh, that sounds great. I'm thinking, oh, this is awesome. He gave really good ratings. I talked to that supervisor, and he said, actually, I'd rate him a 6, and I'd never work with him again. I don't care. I don't need to do all these advanced Google like hypothetical weird questions, like you're stuck in an elevator, with 18 people. How do you whatever? Like it's literally like he's a 6, and I never work with it. And in the book, the author says people are going to be inherently nice. A 6 is a 1. A 7 is like a 5. And an 8's an 8, a 9's a 9, and a 10 is off the chart. So you only want to hire 9s and 10s. So I'd say that's how I got them with a process like that. And then the second thing is you have to have a sales process. If in the agency world, like you can't, like you, what I did is I just had my guy shadow me, and honestly, getting real here, after 2 months, I didn't think it was going to work. I was concerned. And then all of a sudden he started parroting me, and he would like be on a client call and he'd say, we did this thing for this company a couple years ago. And I'm thinking, you liar, you weren't even here. But he was really good at people. We didn't even do commission based. It was just fixed. And then he got profit sharing. But he was really good with people. And we had an established process. So I think in professional services, you've got the sales discovery call, get the information, hear your customer, your prospect. And then we would always do, and I'm an evangelist for this, the proposal review meeting. I never want to create a proposal and just chuck it over the fence unless I have no options. And so we would require that of prospects, so that if I'm going to create a proposal, let's schedule right now a proposal review meeting. And I get them set up with that, and they don't get the proposal until after the meeting. Okay. So
what you just go over what you have in it verbally, and then give them the paper copy.
Yeah. Well, there's, in advertising, a lot of people, I'm going to answer your question here, Mike, but in advertising, a lot of people are just throwing their product out there on like LinkedIn or Facebook. They're like, hey, buy my product. It's proposal software. Buy my product. They're selling their product when you're actually supposed to be selling the click. Mm-hmm. I'm reading, I read this book recently. There we go. He talks about this. Sell the click. On the opt-in page, you're not selling the product. Sell the opt-in. Okay. With a proposal review meeting, you're selling the project. Like, here's why I set it up this way. Here are some things to consider, as we're working together. Here are some, maybe you've got some potential options you can go over. You can overcome objections. And if you're using software, shameless plug, our software allows you to do like configurations and line item upsells and all that kind of stuff. You can actually click things on the call and get a firm price and cut down on back and forth. And so that meeting is so, so important. And I like to say, your prospect is going to have questions. I want to freaking be there. I don't want them asking questions on their own. I want them asking me questions, and I want to be taking away time from them that they would otherwise spend with my competitor, right? So it's the proposal review meeting is absolutely huge. Okay, but that was part that. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that being able to actually answer those questions in real time, you're overcoming objections and or you know potential off routes where they can say, never mind, it's too expensive.
Right.
You can kind of just address those hurdles and move on to the next step at the same time. So being there in person is much better than just sending an email and say, hey, let me know if you have any questions, because 90% of the time they're not going to ask those questions in an email. It's better to have the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, think about it, right? And Mike, how much did you know about me before this podcast? Right.
I had a bio sheet.
Right. But now I'm a live, living human, right? With thoughts and opinions. Like, don't throw your static PDF over the fence and hope for good. I mean, it just we saw our close rate skyrocket when we started doing this, because I got to actually overcome objections.
Well, I think there's also a key point in there too, maybe some context I want to add for people who aren't familiar with the agency business, or at least, based on my experience in the agency business. The time it takes to put together a proposal for a client, depending on how, they obviously vary, but I mean, proposals can be very comprehensive and complex and could take hundreds of hours of teams' time, to put together these proposals. By the time you collect, art and you get numbers and, all these different things. I mean, you could be many, many hours into these things. So I just want people to understand that, this is why it's so important to have that proposal. And you could probably do it on a much smaller proposal that you could rock out, and it would probably be as effective for some of the reasons you can go into.
Right.
But I just wanted to add, that for an agency specifically, you will have invested a lot of your own time and energy into doing this thing at great cost to you and your agency. And if you literally just huck it over the fence and you're one of 20 and, and you don't get the deal, then you've burned that money.
Right.
So
Who was it that we talked to about a year ago that they actually charge for the proposal? They actually make you pay up front before they even send the proposal out.
Shoot, I can't remember who it was, but yeah, no,
it was an interesting concept. It seemed like a deal breaker for me. Like if someone's wanting to charge me before they even send me a proposal, but I understood his thought process because of the amount of time and effort it took to actually put those together. You're looking 10, 15 hours of my time to put this together for you. You're going to pay me for that time.
Right.
But at the same time, that's, as a client, as someone that going to hire them, that would almost be a big turnoff. So
yeah,
that popped in my head.
It's an interesting model. I think some of it you could say could be some stealthy positioning, right?
This for sure.
Distinction.
You could be the agency that's so hot to get into that you've got to pay for our proposals.
Yeah.
You can position yourself for that for sure.
Yeah. I tend to, I don't want to spend 100 hours on a proposal. I don't want to spend 10. And so, my philosophy has always been, get the process down like crazy so I can get a same day proposal out and not have it, take a lot of time. I actually have a really fun story. Can I tell it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, we're on a podcast, I assume so, but
we love fun stories.
Okay, this has to do with throwing things over the fence, okay, or throwing a proposal over the fence. I once had a prospect that they emailed me and they said, "Hey, we have a 25K max, and we can't meet with you." And I'm pretty sure it was like a hard max. It wasn't a soft max. It was like upper caps hard max, and I looked at it and I'm like, that's not very attractive to me. I can't meet with you, and you're at the minimum budget for what we charge. But we needed the work. And so I told my sales guy, hey, let's throw together a really basic proposal. I don't want you to spend more than 10 minutes on it, maybe 15. And I want to just chuck it over the fence, only because we were so busy. And my time investment I could get down. And when your time investment is lower, it can actually bring you to the table on some deals that otherwise you wouldn't have gotten to. But we had no choice, and we needed the work. So he created a proposal based on a template, had a bunch of line items in it that a bunch of things we just turned it off till it got down to 25K. Chucked it over the fence, and didn't hear anything for 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, got a signature request for $34,000. And I learned just this crazy lesson. Couple things. So first thing is, our software at that time, it was the same software, just different era, but our software allows you to turn things off and on and configure. And the fact that they could adjust things was a really big deal. And so they're in some room. I don't even know what's going on. Obviously I don't like this, but I'll take it secondarily. And they just turned a bunch of things on. And it's one thing if I tell you, Ryan, I know you said 25K max, but I have this crystal ball and you're not actually going to be happy unless we spend 34K. That $9,000 is impossible to get. But if they check the boxes and they turn things on, that's just prudence. I wanted these features, right? And the money is easy to get. When they opt in, it's easy. When you sell, it's hard.
So, and I think that's one of the things they talk about in sales so much, right? Is that you're really trying to appeal to a person's, ability to sort of say yes on their own terms. They don't want to be tricked or talked into something. Right. But if they make the decision, so that's an interesting psychological play that you've made there, which is, just let people make their own, or give them the ability anyway to, turn on or off, certain things, just to give them, permission to make the decision on their own.
Right.
So I'm assuming that the product that you were selling this person was software based?
Yeah, a website. Yeah.
Okay. So are you adding on stuff like, okay, we'll give you login capability, upload features, this, that. So do you have it broken down like that as like, because the initial consult and figuring out what they need kind of depends on the quote. So how do you have everything kind of just line itemed out as far as an initial? I understand the concept, but it's kind of hard to have everything in one bucket where they can check boxes and can you break us down on how it works?
Yeah. Well, for your listeners, to see this visually, if you check out smartpricingtable.com, we have some sample proposals up there so you can see exactly how it's broken down, how I would do this. But to describe it verbally, I would say, what I like to do is break down the project into smaller parts. I like to modularize it. Number one, because it's easier to digest for them. But number two, if I modularize it, I can create reusable items that I can sell later. So I can stop doing the same thing over and over, and proposals don't have to take so freaking long. Okay. I'd have a section called additional items for consideration. And I would put 2, 3, 4 items in that section based on the sales call and my intuition. And I cannot tell you how often people will select things in there that you had no idea they wanted or didn't really think they would select. It's just putting it there. So for instance, for a service-based business, having in that little section, you could have additional, hour monthly retainer of hours. And so you give them 5 hours at X price. And in the description, you say, this also entitles you to priority service. We'll get back to you within 4 hours and do the work within 24 hours, as long as it's less than 2 hours of work, whatever. Do your terms. Okay. And people will literally just turn that on because there's a FOMO at play. The second you say retainer, they're thinking like a maintenance retainer and high priority. They're thinking, oh, I don't want to. Oh man, I didn't even think about this. Like we've got to have quick support. This project is mission critical, right? So they turn it on. They own it. Okay. Yeah. And then the last part of this thing is configurations on the line item level. So on our website, you'll see like on one of the website bids, there's a blog line item. And so you have this blog line item, and then you have configurations on the line item level. This is key. So that they can add things like MailChimp integration, $250, author bio pages, $500. You're not just allowing them to turn off and on things that are $2,000-$3,000, but you're allowing them to like little increases, right? That turn into thousands of dollars. And they can literally get it, like maybe they have a 20K budget and they can get it to 19,500 by turning a few things off and on. So that's the way that I typically like to structure things.
Do you ever run into issues with scope creep, where you've got these preset values, dollar amounts that, 250 for the MailChimp integration, but he needs it to do specific things that go above and beyond the $250 amount. I mean, when you put your prices out there in black and white in something like this, it almost kind of forces your hand to give the desired product for that price, even though it took longer and had additional things that you didn't really necessarily have in the proposal.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't give those things to them, Mike. I would let's say they wanted related blog posts, and one of the reasons why agencies in particular get themselves in a lot of pain is they're not clear. Like, imagine the difference between how I scope out a blog on our website versus someone that just says, and we're also going to add a blog to your website for $2,000. That scenario, Mike, is where you run into that. You have no handles to grab onto. You have no way to push back because you simply said blog. And a blog, of course, you're telling me that you're not going to give me author bio pages? What? Like, isn't that standard? And you're just sitting there, you're like, I can either be a jerk or you're in charge forever.
Yeah.
When you provide clarity, I actually have a video course I'm launching here soon. It's like 5-minute videos for 10 days. And one of the topics I talk about is clarity, and building a fence around your work. When you have some level of detail and you define the spirit of the work, it's incredible how much you can push back and save yourself from scope pain. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit also about, pricing strategies as it pertains to proposal writing, and, maybe where you found some success. So, I mean, for a lot of people, especially freelancers, they're billing hourly. A lot of people are getting hip to this sort of value-based pricing kind of models and things like that, and I've seen various formulas for how you should, quote sort of a bronze, silver, gold kind of package, and things like this. Are there tips or tricks or things that you've learned along the way that make a lot of sense in proposal writing that either convert really well or have saved you a lot of time?
Yeah. When it comes to pricing, one of the biggest challenges is you have to understand your service and what's actually entailed. It is all kind of connected to the previous question, but I love the saying, if there's a mist in the pulpit, there's a fog in the congregation, right? If you don't know what you're selling, I will take this to the bank. Your prospect has no freaking clue. You think about this all day long. They think about it like once every 2 years. Like, they have no clue. And so you have to be clear. But until you're clear, you can't price appropriately, right? I like, when I'm outlining a service, I like to have a summary sentence. And maybe it's like, maybe I'm doing social media management. Okay. A summary sentence that I'm going to manage their Facebook profile, and I'm going to do 10 posts a month. Then I like to say included work, and I do a bulleted list. I like the bulleted list because it's easy for you to create. It's even enjoyable because you're defining your business, and it's easy for your customer your prospect to digest. It's also easier for you to price. The reason why you can't figure out how to price that particular widget may be because you haven't broken it down and you don't know the effort. Once I know the effort, then I can build in my margin. It's not perfect, right? But it's a lot better than no description. I can build in my margin, and if it's a customer that just needs more, then I can increase that. We actually have a kind of a cool feature where with a proposal, you can add a surcharge or an extra percentage increase. So I create a proposal based on a template, and let's say it's $20,000 by default. I can say crank that up 30% because maybe it's an enterprise level customer, and I know our normal prices are just going to kill us if we do that. So few thoughts on price. Did I miss the essence of the question, though? Are there some specifics?
No, I don't know if there's anything in particular, right? I mean, a lot of people have different theories on how you should price and how you should lay things out for a potential customer. There's different formulas I've seen, sort of this idea of 1x, 1.1x, and 1.5x or something is how you
Right.
should price your things. There's some of these different models for how you should price things. But, it sounds like the way that your software sort of helps you maybe do a better job of doing proposals is it sort of forces you to have insights on these individual things. So you need to go in and price out your line items, which kind of then, even though the request that comes in might be kind of custom, although I guess you're trying to get away with that with the product as service, there might be sort of a core set of like 10 things that you use in all proposals or, combination of these things. And so by understanding the cost of each line, basically you can start to build your proposals that way. So it seems like maybe the way that you're building your pricing might be a little bit different. And then I guess at its root, how a company decides to price their things, might be based on materials or hours or, whatever.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of hourly work because I can't ever make more than my hourly rate. I like fixed costs, and because it's a game and it's a pattern, right? And every time I do that widget, I get a chance to improve the process and make a higher effective hourly rate. I've made, a lot of agencies are 150, $200, whatever. I've had projects at $350, and we provide, I provided high value, but it was all because we had a fixed cost. I'd rather play that game because there's a potential, right? Mm-hmm. Than there's no potential, and we're just going to make our hourly rate.
Yeah, I think it all depends on the industry too.
Yeah.
When I was doing landscaping, I had to get real nitty gritty with square footage and, this is how much pipe I'm going to need to put an irrigation system in or, so on and so forth. When I do DJ work, I used to have packages that I would sell. I would sell, like $800 for this, $1,200 for this, $3,000 for that. And finally I got to the point where I didn't want to sell the $800 package because it's the same amount of effort for me to come and set that up as it is for the $3,000 package. Same time frame, same everything. Why am I charging the $800 rate?
Right.
So now I have a $3,500 flat rate. If you want me, that's what it costs for me to come out for the day. And you get me and you get what I provide that day. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's my rate.
Yeah. Well, and a proposal system like what Joe's talking about, Mike, for somebody like you could be great because you could set that flat rate and all that stuff, but then you could have all these little add-ons, so for, an additional fee, they could do these different things, and they might actually talk themselves into a much bigger bill.
Yeah. I've tried it. And I have done that before in the past. Like, add black lights for $500, add a gobo projection on the wall for an extra $500. And for me, it's just, I guess I'm leaving money on the table, and I could make an extra $500, $600, $700 off each gig. But I just tell the wedding planners, this is what I charge, and you get the same thing every time. So
there's a simplicity argument that I have a lot of respect for. This is really funny because my wife, makes fun of me because I have check boxes and checklists and for everything. For my personal life, for business, for getting the kids out the door. Like, it's just how I am. And she doesn't do that at all. And I would argue I don't drop things, like, ever. Like, that probably annoys you, but I don't. But I have to acknowledge, like, your system is a lot simpler, and maybe you're more, I don't know, maybe you're having more fun. Like, there's definitely an argument.
It took a load off for sure, because I remember I'd send these long emails and I'd be like, for this amount of money, you get this. For this amount of money, you get this. For this amount of money, you get everything. And it was getting to be so like, why am I breaking it down? My time is worth this to me. You're hiring me. What I provide, what I bring. Yeah, it makes your show look great, but I bring the same thing every time for every client now. So you get to expect what you're going to get. But instead of this negotiating back and forth and fighting over dollars and cents, I set a high price. If they say yes, great. If they say no, good deal. Find someone else. But essentially it weeds out there was this period of time where, like, the clientele that would go for the smaller packages were the clientele that I didn't even want to deal with in the first place. Yeah. So it got rid of that whole thing out of the equation.
Yeah.
So
Everyone,
Well, I imagine Joe can relate to that. I mean, as a guy that does agency work, I can already see it. All the guys that want the $500 website are the ones that will drag you for weeks and months and that, all that. And then the ones that'll pay you $100,000 just stay out of your hair and let you get your website done.
Yeah. And
right?
they're not attached to the money. The marketing director is not attached to the 50 grand in the way that the 2-person company CEO is attached to his $1,000 and doesn't have vision. It's just like, I know that well.
Well, so let's talk a little bit here in sort of our last few minutes, just about sort of, I guess, again, making the transition from a corporate employee to launching this SaaS business, this company, and then what you've done, either the same or different, or based on all this experience you had prior to launching this company. Are you doing things the same way? Have you got some new killer insights that have come to you just sort of in this recent launch versus, maybe the way you did things in your prior SaaS? I mean, is there any, I guess, learnings is what I'd like to get to. Just sort of, what have you figured out so far in the journey of your new business, but where it's going from here?
I do everything differently in this SaaS. So just clear on that. Than the SaaS of my teenage years. There's one of my favorite books is called The E-Myth. And
that's a great book.
Yeah.
There's another one called The E-Myth Revisited too, I think.
Yeah. I think I read both, or I read just that second one. But one of the things that just, I remember reading this section in the book at a coffee stand 8 years ago. I'll never forget it. But he talks about hard systems versus soft systems. Hard systems are things like the whiteboard on the wall. It doesn't need maintenance. It doesn't need a policy book. These are things like software that have built-in rules. They're hard systems. When I have a meeting coming up, my Gmail alerts me. That's a hard system. Okay. Versus a soft system, think people-driven. This is my assistant alerting me, right? And she knows to alert me because I have a policy document. And that policy document outlines everything that he or she is supposed to do. Okay. So one of the big differences, I think the biggest contrast I'd like to make is between agency life and SaaS. And I loved my agency. I had 5 hours of required work per week when I sold it. I loved it.
That's great.
I talk to agency owners all the time that just hated their life. It was so smooth. And the 5 hours, a lot of it was just finance that I didn't want to outsource. But the difference with SaaS, just to, kind of give a preview, is you go from selling a $30,000 asset to selling $100 a month subscription. Okay. So that's a little bit of an adjustment. I remember someone talking to me, they're like, 49 seems kind of high. Like the competitor's at like 27. And I'm like, listen, buddy. I'm used to negotiating $50,000 deals. And I'm like, how are we on the phone still? I'm about to hang out. Right. But that's a big transition. And SaaS is very front end heavy, very heavy. I mean, that's what a lot of agencies will like have an idea and they'll start one and it never goes anywhere because it's so heavy to get off the ground. I had to be on my own doing it full time for it to work. It's so expensive because you don't get any revenue. When you have a professional services business, you're profitable almost right away if you want to be, if you can be. With SaaS, software as a service, it's a slow grind, but it's incredibly stable. So I don't have the fire drills that I used to have in agency life. Some, hair on fire, some agent or customer's really mad. This big retainer is going to cancel. Uh-oh, crud. I'm going to have to let everyone go. Now it's more, it's really steady. It's just a huge investment up front. And you also have to learn marketing on a new level. In agency world, like you can get by with just being a really good salesperson because there's a lot of referrals and they're big enough deals. In the SaaS world, you have to be a master of marketing because you can't talk to everyone for an hour. And you've got low ticket, low annual value kind of contracts. So any specific contrasts or things you're looking for there?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think, some of those are the differences in running an agency type business versus a SaaS type company. So I think that's an interesting insight, especially because there seems to be, it's maybe easier than ever to start a SaaS company. And I know of a lot of creative people who've jumped ship and gone and started a little app or, different things like that. So, it is maybe a more common transition now than it used to be.
Ryan, I'm going to sound like an idiot if I don't finish my thought, because I was talking about these hard and soft systems. With the agency world or professional services, it's a bunch of policy books. You're limited on what you can automate. With SaaS, it's hard systems for the win. It's incredible. If you don't like it, you can generally fix it in an automated way, and that's distinct. In the agency life, that's why I always had such a hard time scaling. This is all people based, and if I lose a person, it could literally set me back 6 months. That's not how SaaS works.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great difference too, because I think you're seeing. I even mentioned it earlier, like with our agency, moving from sort of what I would consider traditional agency into more of like a subscription type model. That move there is trying to turn agency businesses into SaaS businesses right there. Right. And so there's some crossover in terms of the way you're doing your marketing and things like that as well. Right. Because you're not chasing down the single big win. You need people who sort of need a lower tier, something in the middle that, makes sense for their business. And, so it's changed the whole game, as it pertains to the kinds of deals we're chasing.
Right.
We're still obviously doing traditional work because, we just launched this thing and we got to pay the bills. But the idea is that, over time, it's that volume game, right? Instead of having 3 high paying clients or, then 2 and then 1 that comes back every, once a year or whatever.
Right.
Instead of having this insanity, you've got this stable group of people that, if you lose 1 or 2 and then you'll gain 1 or 2 and then it all kind of averages out. So you don't feel those big shifts.
Yeah. Yeah. Recurring revenue is just so huge. I remember the fiscal cliff. A lot of our stuff was one and done. And one thing I wish I would have done sooner is started investing in recurring revenue sources inside of an agency. Because you get busy, you go about your work, and you stop and you look and you're like, holy cow, that recurring number keeps getting bigger. And I haven't been sitting on my hands. I've been distracted, and I'm so thankful for that number. Even if it's a small percentage, like that could be your margin every month. So
yeah, no, I think that's great insight. Well, cool. So here in the closing moments, Joe, do you want to stop and give people a place where they could chase you down online, maybe check out the website?
Yeah. So smartpricingtable.com. I've got 2 things on there. One, if you found this conversation interesting and you're like, I don't like proposals, Joe sounds like he has fun writing them. What the heck? Who is this guy? Book a demo. You'll get that demo right with me. And I'd love to tire kick with you and see if it could be a fit. I also have a free guide called the Profitable Proposal Blueprint. But I've got a way better guide. It's just not live yet. It's a 10-day, 5-minute video course. It's super fresh. It's got all my secrets, and it's easy to digest everything. Because I don't have it listed yet, if I don't have it on my website, you can email joe@smartpricingtable.com, and I'd be happy to send you that resource. But besides that, I'm on LinkedIn. I try to be pretty active on there. Those are the big venues or big ways.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Joe. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today.
Likewise, Ryan. This has been a fun one.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. See you guys next time.